Alright, so today we will learn about actually I want to do a small review, okay, um, because I want to make sure that we're not confused with some things. For example, remember when we print, let's say, if I say hello world, okay, if I print this, or if I run this, I will see hello and world printed on two different lines, right? And that's because the print method actually prints whatever we give as argument, and it moves to the next line, okay. So in order to prevent that, we did something like this, right? End equal to empty string, right? If we print this, now hello will print and it won't move to the next line, it'll stay there and will print world again. So if we run this, that's what we see, right? So we use this end equal whatever, right? So up until now we didn't know what it was, we just used it. So I want to explain what that is, okay? So let's take a step back and let's define a function. Let's define a function called add a and b, right? So return a plus b, okay? And then call this, let's say 1 plus 2. I'm just going to print the result, okay? So if I run this, it'll print me 3, right? So the way I've called it here, so I'm assuming that the first position is A, right? I'm passing A as 1 as A and 2 as B, right? So this is called positional arguments. So it has to match with whatever position. But in Python, you can actually pass it with the name of the argument itself. So I can say A equal 1 and B equal 2. Okay, so this way I'm passing it based on the name of the variable. So if I run this, it's going to give me the same effect. Okay, so instead of passing by position, I'm passing by the name of the argument. Okay, so what is the advantage of this is that I don't have to pass it by the position. I can just switch this around, b equal to 2 and a equal to 1. Okay, so that will print me the same result. Okay, so this is another way of passing values. So you would ask, why would I ever need to pass by name rather than the position, right? So let's take an example why we would need something like this. Okay, let's say I have a method called greet, okay, and it's going to take a name, okay, and it's going to say print hi name. Okay, so if we run this, let's say we want to greet John. Okay, all it's going to do is it's going to say hi John, right? So now in addition to the name, I also want to pass a language. Okay, so I'm going to assume that the if language is equal to English, so I'm going to denote English by this en. If it is English, I will print hi. And I'm also going to support other languages. So let's say if it is French, fr for French. Okay, I'm just making these up. Okay, so I'm expecting the language to come as either en, fr. So if fr comes in, I'm going to say print salut. Okay, and if it is language equal to, let's say, Spanish, Hispania, so I would say hola. right? And if there's anything other than that, I'm just going to say greeting. Okay. Okay. So so right now if I won't be able to. I'm expecting two parameters, right, for my function. So if I run this, Python will complain that saying missing required positional argument language, right? So I can pass language here. If I pass in en, then it will print me hi. If I pass in French, it will pass me salut. I mean print salut, right? Things like that. So uh, now Python also provides something called default value. So instead of passing this value for language every time, I probably can do something like this, or I can do something like this that says, if I say equal en, this means that if no one provides this function a specific value for language, it'll take the value as English. Okay, so now I don't have to pass the language. If I just print greet John, it's going to, by default, it's going to assign the value en to the language, and it's going to print hi John. Okay. Now, still doesn't explain to me why I would need to call the arguments by name. So in here I can call this like this, right? But it still doesn't give me enough reason, justification. Doesn't give me enough justification for me to call by this name, right? So now let's assume, okay, so instead of two parameters that I'm expecting, I'm going to have another one called formal. Okay, so whether it's a formal greeting or an informal greeting. So by default it's false. Okay, I'm going to give it a value false. So here if I say, if its language is English and if formal, right, I would say, I don't know what formal is. I will say hello. Okay, hello name. And otherwise I would say hi. That's informal, right? Same for French. If it is formal, I would print bonjour. Else I would print salut, right? For French, for Spanish, I don't think there is any difference. So I'm just going to leave it like this. Okay. So now if so both of these arguments, I have a default value. That means if I don't pass anything for that argument, I would simply, again, I would just print hi John, right? So so now here comes, here you will see why having the named argument is important or useful. So now I can say that instead of I'm always, if I know that my language is English, and all I'm concerned is that I just need to change the formal to informal or formal, I can do something like this. I can just say formal equal to true here. Okay, so if I want to print something formal, I can say, okay, hello John. So the language gets defaulted to English, and I only want to change the formal to true. Okay, so here the positional argument would not work here, like, because there are three parameters. I would need to use the keyword argument or named argument, right? Then only Python would be able to distinguish whether I'm referring to the second parameter or third parameter, right? So if I say it explicitly that I'm only setting the third one, I would have to name it. Okay, so that's where the naming your parameters or naming your arguments comes in handy. Okay, you guys clear on this, or make sense? So having default values for your parameters is it's kind of helpful, right? You don't have to specify all your parameters again and again if you know you're going to repeat the same thing again and again. Okay, and calling it by name, right? It's helpful if you have some of them you want to leave it default, and you want to call some of them with specific values. So you only want to change some of the parameters, but rest of them you just want to leave it alone or keep it default. Okay, so now we know where this print statement is coming from, right? This print end. So if you look at the print signature here, first it takes a bunch of values, then it takes a separator, then it takes an end character. Okay, so what we are doing is that when we say end equals something, we are using something like this. We are calling an argument only that one specific one, because the rest of them, if you look at the library, actually these ones have separator, end, file, and flush. They all have a default value like this. That's why we never have to specify all of them. We are only, if we are in this case, we're only changing the end character. So we say that, right? So we say end equal to nothing, basically. Okay. Or if I print hello world again, it will just print on the same line. So all we are saying is that into the print function is that I am okay with all the other parameters except for the end one. I just want to change it, just like how we've done it here in the greet. Okay, so I know some people had this question, what is this end doing? I mean, it didn't seem right, right? Because we're used to passing just our arguments, like without these keywords, right? Any questions? Is that clear? Yeah, okay. So now, why do we specify this empty character for end? What is the default end? So it turns out that if you look at the if you look at the documentation, you'll see that the default one is actually a new line character. So what is a new line character? Let's do this. So if I say print hello, and this the slash n, and if I put world, what this character, this is actually, it's an escape character, this slash, and this n specifies, the combination of both specifies that we want a new line character in there. So if I print this is the same as saying that print hello, right? Because by default the print provides you that new line character, so it's gonna print hello and the new line character, which moves it to the next line. Okay, so this is the same as printing twice like this. So instead of saying instead of separating into two calls, I'm calling it in one call, and I'm saying the string itself, I'm saying that it's going to contain the new line character. Okay, so it ends up printing in separate lines. Okay, so this is called the new line character. Okay, this is very important for you. Okay, keep this in mind. So anytime you want to print to the new line, right, or you want to specify it's going to start with a new line, right, the next word, you specify this new line character. So I can specify as many times I want, right? Right. So what will this print? It just anytime it sees that new line, it's just going to move it to the new line. Okay, the printing. Okay, that's what the new line character is for. It's to specify that we have reached the end of a line and we want to go to a new line. Okay, that's where the new line comes from. Okay, clear on that? So new line character. Okay. All right. So um, mm, everybody comfortable so far? All right. So now this is another new topic that we're going to learn because we need this for our project or assignment. Um, it's about how we write and read information to an file. Okay. So what is a file? Can anybody tell me what the file is? What's a file? Come on. What is a file?
Something you can download, export, and just have saved on your computer.
Yeah, so it's something that you can save it in your computer, right? That even though even after you shut down your computer and reboot, the file won't disappear. It's actually saved to a hard disk, right? So it's a way to save it to the hard disk for long-term memory. Okay, and you can nowadays you can share files over the net, over the internet, right? Over the network. So it's for storing for long-term memory, and that's one of the pillars in terms of computers, right? You have to store things for longer-term memory. Um, Up until now, all we have done is that we did some computation within our function. We just printed out to our console or read something from the console, but nothing was permanent, right? Everything was gone after our program exited, right? So in this one, we're going to learn how to actually read from an existing file or write to a file. Okay, so let me create a file here. Okay, I'm just going to call this names.txt. Okay, all the by the way, all files, you know that they all have an extension, right? It's just a way to specify what kind of file it is. So txt usually stands for text file. Okay, so here's my file. I'm just going to put some names. Okay, 3 names. Okay, so I'm going to close this. So in Python, the way to read files, you have a function called open. Okay, so open, if you look at it takes the file name and something called the mode. So file name in this case, it'll be, because I'm in this, my program is here and I want to access this file, right? So which is in the same directory as my file, so I can just say name.txt. Okay, that's where my file is. Otherwise I will have to specify the full path, but for now just look at this. So basically we think of it as we're passing the file name, and the second argument we need to pass is it's something called the mode. Okay, and it's a string. So it has 2 parts to it, or we have to specify 2 characters here. Okay, so first character is that tells you whether you want to um, okay, hold on a second. So let me just look at the documentation. So if you go to our library reference and search for something called open, okay, it should be here somewhere. Or let's search for something called files. All right. Sorry guys, I just want to make sure that I'm telling you the right thing. I'm surprised they don't have that open. Okay, anyway, so we're just gonna find out. Okay, so it contain, you have to pass for the for the mode we have to specify whether we want to um, read a file or write a file, and whether we are reading the file in reading a text file or a binary file. Okay, so don't worry about it, worry about binary files for now. We're only going to read text, right? So remember that file that we created is text. Okay, so in order to say, let's say if we want to read something, we say the first character has to be read, and the next one specifies whether it's a um, what kind of read are we doing. Are we doing a read on a text file or a binary file? Okay, in this case we're doing a read on a text file, so we specify these characters. Okay, so you can have read, write, append for the first character. Okay, so let me just R for read, W for write if you want to write, and A for append. I will explain what append means, but for now we know what read and write are. Okay, and the second character, it specifies what kind of file operations we want to do on the file, whether we want to read the file as a text file, right, or as a binary file. Okay, so don't worry about the binary file for now, and don't worry about the append for now. You just look at the read, write, and the mode. Okay, so we'll only specify read text and write text for now. Okay, and there's another one, another parameter that we need to pass, which is called the encoding. Okay, so we will specify this. Okay, so we'll specify this by okay, we have to specify mode equal to this, yeah, and encoding. So encoding is something, for now just think of it as the format in how the file is written. Okay, so in it, because by default the operating system that you are working on, it'll use the default encoding to write the files. It's how your your text is actually written to the file in binary format. So that's called encoding, but for now you just always make sure to specify UTF-8. Okay, it's a format that is like universally used. So if you're reading or writing from, let's say, Windows, and you want to pass the file to someone who's using Mac or Linux, if you don't specify this encoding, it's going to read or write in the encoding of the operating system. Okay, so if you always specify explicitly what the encoding is, then you can interchange, like you don't have to worry about which operating system your end user is using. So okay, so always specify UTF-8. Okay, so the UTF-8, and so this is how we so this open method, open function, once we call on this file with the mode and the encoding, it's going to give back an object. Okay, you can name it something like this, F or whatever. For our I'm just going to name it file. So now file, you can do operations on the file. Okay, so I can do read something. So if I want to read the entire content of this of the file, that all of these things, I can call everything with just one read. So here it will be the content. Okay, if I read all this, okay, that's everything that is in the file gets read and written to this variable. But you have to be kind of you have to kind of make sure that if the file is too big, as in like gigabytes size, when you do this read, it's going to read everything into memory, into the variable. So like usually this is not a good way, because you don't want to read the whole file and put it into memory as a variable. Okay, but I'm just going to show this for explanation or demonstration purpose. So once I have this content, I'm just going to print out the content. Okay, so we can see what's in it. Basically we want to print it out of a console. Okay, so with files, there's another important thing that we have to make sure that anytime you open a file, you have to close the file. Okay, so files are considered as resources by the operating system. You know how usually when you open up a file in some Word or something, if you don't close it and let like shut down your computer or something, and you try to open that file again later on, you might have some corruption, or could not always, but you could end up corrupting the file. Or sometimes what happens is that if you're working on that file, you open it, you do some read or whatever, right, and if you forget to close it, or something horribly wrong goes in the program while you're doing, and the program just crashes, your file will not get closed. Okay, so you just have to make sure that you have to always close the file. So next, when you read it the next time, it's closed state, and it's not locked, or like no corruption has occurred. Okay, so you always have to make sure to close the files. Okay, so for now, all we're doing is we're opening the file, reading the file, like all of it, and putting it into this content variable. Okay, so let's run this. So what gets printed is basically whatever we had in the text file. Okay, so we read the whole entire content and put it into a variable. It's actually a string, right, and we printed the string. But if you notice that when we printed it, it printed into these new lines, right? So the content that we got must have the new lines at the end. Okay, so in fact it does, because every time you hit return, it actually creates a new line and puts it into the file. So that is the reason why when we printed that whole content, it got printed in new lines, because there was a new line character in there. Okay, so in order to explicitly see that new line character, let's do something. So we have this content, right? Remember, we can what can we do? So if I split it on this new line character, I should be able to get, remember this thing is a string, right? We read the whole thing as a string. It must contain those new lines, otherwise it wouldn't have printed to this next line. So what I'm saying here is, remember the split method? I'm just going to split everything, that content, by this new line, and whatever, and it's going to give me a list, right? So now this list should contain the individual ones. So if I just print the list here, right, it should give me a list. So let's do this. So it gives me those individual ones without the new line character. Okay, because I split it on that. Okay, so whenever we write a new line or enter it, it actually puts a new line character in there. We just don't see it, but it's there. So when we read it back and split it, we can split it on the new lines. Okay, because when I just printed the content alone, it did put those new lines, and that's how it was able to move to the next lines. Okay, so, and I explained to you that this is actually a bad thing, that you don't want to read the whole content. For example, if the file size is really like in gigabytes or something, and you don't have enough memory, you will just run out of memory and your program will just crash. So there's another way to do this. Okay, so if I say file dot read line, okay, it'll just only read me that first line only. Okay, and if I keep reading line, so this will be my first line. If I keep reading lines at a time, it'll just keep reading the next line. Okay, so now if I print line 1, line 2, okay, what do you think actually will happen? So this read line will read me this line, and the next read line will read the second line. Okay, and so on and so forth. So every time you call this read line, your file object actually maintains a position as to what position I am in. So it's right now it'll start at 1, and you call read line, it'll move to the next line. So the next time you call read line, it knows that okay, you're at 2, so I should read the second line. So every time you call read line, it keeps moving that position, that file object. It maintains that state. Okay, so if I print this line, something you might not have expected might happen. So what just happened? We know that the first read line statement read the first line, right? That's John, and the second one was Bob. But when I printed this, something happened. It's like extra space in here, right? Extra new line. It actually happens to that when you use a read line, it reads all of this as well as the new line and gives us the new line character in there. So this line 1 actually contains the new line character as well. So when we use print to print that, it prints line 1, which is John and the new line. So it prints John and the new line. Then print line itself prints a new line, so it moves it over here. Okay, that's why you see that extra space or extra new line. Are you guys following me? Yeah. All right. So how can we remove that line, new line? So you can, this is a string. So we know that in my previous assignment, we used that the strip method, right? If you don't pass anything, it'll strip anything that is a new line character or any space. So if I just strip this, it won't have that new line. And if I run this now, that line is gone. Okay, so the strip actually strips anything like a space or a tab or a new line, anything that depicts like an empty or space character. Okay, so that's how we can strip it out. Okay, so if I do read line again, and if I do fourth time, okay, let me just print these out. In my file, I only had 3 lines, right? So if I ask for the fourth time read line, what do you think might happen for the fourth line? What do you think will happen?
Go back to the first.
No, good guess, but no. It's actually, it just gives me nothing basically. Okay, so that's how you know that you've reached the end of the line. When you read something and gives you back an empty line, that's how you know. So just to explain that, so if I say line 4 equal to empty, like nothing, this should tell me this should print true, because I'm comparing. If it is empty, if it is the end of the line or end of file, that will tell me that I've reached the end of the file. So it should tell me it's true. Okay, so what actually gets assigned to line 4 is actually nothing, which is an empty string, right? This is an empty string, by the way. String we usually specify with a quote and put something inside, right? Right now we didn't put anything in there. That means it's empty. Okay, that's what you get when you reach the end of the line. Okay, so this is kind of tedious, right? Every time we do, let's say we want to read all the lines, all the names, right? And for every name that we want to do something, it's kind of, we have to keep reading, and we have to do have to have a while loop, right? Because we don't know ahead of time that how many lines are going to be in this file, right? So Python gives us another idiom where the file is similar to a list. We can do an iteration on it. So we can do for, let's say, line in file. You know how we did the for something item in list, or for some item in a string, because we said string is also kind of like a list. This file is actually, you can think of like a list too, or more precisely, it's an iterator. It gives you an iterator, but don't worry about that. But just think of it as that you can iterate over it, and you get, it's like, think of it as a file, think of it as a list, that when you do this, every line is actually a line. But this line actually will contain the new line character as well. So you have to watch out for that. So let's just print this out. So because every line contains the new line character and we're using a print, this is also going to depict the same behavior where we have those extra new lines. Okay, because we're printing whatever the contents of the line which has the new line, so that's going to move it to the next line, and print itself prints a new line, so it's going to move it again. So you're going to have those double spacing. So if we run this, you see the double spacing, right? And how can we avoid that? I showed before.
Strip.
Yes, strip. Good. So if we strip it out, we'll just strip out the new line character. Okay, so that this part just gives us only that whatever we are expecting to get. Okay, so this is a kind of a handy way to do this. Now, suppose I want to create a variable out of it. So if I say names, right? If I want to create a list out of it, I will just simply I can do names dot append, right? Right. This should just put all my lines, strip it out, and append to my names. So at the end of this iteration, and once I close this, I should have, if I print this out, I should get the list of names, right? So that's how you can get a list of or stuff out of the file. Okay. Any questions so far? All right. So, but you always have this problem where, you know, even though we close explicitly, right? Because I said that it's good to, I mean, you have to close the files because you don't want to have any sort of leaks or corruption, right? Unopened file. But you can still end up leaving the file open if something were to happen inside your code that you're trying to do something. Let's say, for example, let's say you were like expecting these to be numbers, and you call int function somewhere to convert that string to a number. And if that, for whatever reason, if that string wasn't a number, but rather some crazy character, and that could blow up your program, right? Remember, yeah, right? You've seen that when you call int with something that is not a number, it blows up, right? So when that happens, this file might not get closed, right? So for that reason, Python gives us an idiom. Okay, what we can do is you can say with. This is something new. So we can call with so this actually with what it does, it avoids us having to write the close explicitly. Okay, so it's like, so even if your program crashes for whatever reason in the middle, you don't have to worry about not closing. So you don't need the close anymore. if you use this with, and this is actually you have to put it inside the block. So this, remember, the colon creates a block. So instead of doing explicitly open and close, you can do with open, and then you specify whatever this output of this you want to assign it as some variable, right? I can use this f or whatever. Okay, so I'm just calling this file. So if I use with, then I don't need to worry about my program blowing up. Python will always make sure that when you do with it'll close whatever the resource. Okay, so you should always use with open instead of file and then close explicitly. So this way you're safe. Okay, so if I want to do this, I should have, let's say, names here. I'm just going to iterate through my file and then print my names. So this should give me the same thing. Okay, so this is the way to read the file. Okay, so now let's do some writing file. Okay, so how can we do the writing? Same thing actually. So let's say we want to write some names. Okay, let's just put this. So I'm just going to initialize some names in my program. Okay, what is it? Vaishna. Okay, I want to write these names to my names name.txt. Okay, so I will say I'm going to open this file, but instead of in read mode, I will say I want to do it in the write mode. Remember the mode? I'm still going to write it as text. That's the T. Specify the encoding. I'm going to say this. Now what I can do is, so I will just iterate through my names in my names list, right? And then instead of this, I would say file. So I use read line to read a line. If I want to write a line, I can just say file write line. Where is it? Write? Oh yeah, write. It's just write. Read and write. I can just do the write, and I can just pass in the name. Okay. And when I use the with, and the Python will make sure to close the file at the end. Okay. So if I run this, so basically I have all these names, and I'm writing it, right? If I run this, and if I open my file, what happens is that there is no new line, right? It's just printed everything in one line. Okay, so one thing to note is that when we read it, it had that new line character for every line, right? But when you were writing it, you also have to specify the new line character. Otherwise, it'll just go on one line like this. So if you want to put that new line, we just have to explicitly create a new line. So we're creating a new string with that name and the new line character, and we write that. If we do this, then all of these would get properly written with the new line character. So let's run this and look at it. Okay, so we have to explicitly specify the new line character when we write to it. Okay, so any questions so far? We're clear on the new lines? So when we open a file and we're doing the write, it'll automatically go to the next lines if you make sure to put the new line character. Otherwise, it'll just keep, like as you saw before, right? It's just gonna keep putting everything in one line. Okay, so now you have a way to create files automatically from your program, from Python. Okay, text files for now, but still very powerful, right? So instead of remember the previous programs that we wrote, we always wrote something, we always took input, right, to get some information into our program. But now we can set up files and we just pass the file name or something as input, and you can, in your program, you can go through and read the file contents. Like, so for example, that matrix, right, the previous assignment, it was kind of tedious every time you typed in that numbers every time, right? So if you had that matrix in file, like if suppose it is really a big matrix, lots of values in it, you can put those values in a file and read line by line, and you can do the split on the file for those space characters, right? You do a first, you do a strip to strip out the new line at the end, and then the resulting you would do a split with a space, right? So you can get individual values out of it. You see where I'm going, right? All right. So another thing to note is that every time I run this program, my file just gets so if I explicitly, if I do something like this, if I add a John and Bob here and I save it, okay, so my file has this. So but if I run this program and go back to the file, John and Bob are gone, right? You see that? So this, whenever we have this write operation, it actually overwrites the file. Okay, so this append method, if we specify a for this, what will happen is that, so I have right now I have all of you, right, and let me add John and Bob. So now if I run, okay, let's start with John and Bob. Okay, save this. I have the initial file, John and Bob. If I run this program and in the append mode, it won't overwrite the file, it'll just keep appending to the end of the file. Okay, so I have to have a new line here. So when I start printing, it'll print here to this line. When I start writing, it'll write. Okay, so what will happen is it won't, if I run this, all those names get appended. So if I run again, it won't overwrite, it keeps appending your stuff to it. That's what the append mode is. So write mode always overwrites the file, basically erases everything in the file and writes as like new. Whereas append, it appends to it. Okay, it keeps the existing content as is, just keeps writing to the new line. So if I didn't have a new line at the end, if I had my cursor up here, there's nothing there, I think what might happen is it'll start writing here. So let's just run this. You see, it started writing from there. Okay, that's something to keep in mind. So if the file doesn't end with the new line character, it won't know. It just starts writing from the start. Okay, you know what I mean? Yeah. So that's the key takeaway. So the new lines and how to read and write to the file, and with the with keyword, you don't have to worry about closing the file explicitly. And even if your program blows up, Python will make sure to close the file automatically. Okay. And why do we need to close files? Because they are resources, and resources always need to be released at the end. Otherwise, it just your operating system, it just keeps a tab of all the things that are open, and it might run into some issues like file corruption, or your computer might run out of memory or file handles, things like that. So these are called resources. Files are resources, and you always have to make sure to close them. Okay. And bugs happens because sometimes your computer freezes up, you run a program. There could be bug where they're opening up some intermediate files and they're not closing it properly or something. And yeah, that's what happens. So always follow best practices.
Why does Python have like the file closed when you can just do the with?
I think they didn't have with initially, then they added that because they saw the issues, I think. But that's a good question. Any other questions? So let's just recap what we learned. We learned about new lines, right? What they are. And we learned about what these positional versus named arguments, right? Why we have them. And we learned about reading and writing files and about the mode, write, read, append, and whether it's a text or binary. I know we didn't look at the binary one. For now, we just looked at the text. Binary one just gets a little bit more involved because I don't want you guys to be bogged down by that. I just want you guys first to understand the bigger concepts. Okay. And this encoding, for now, just make sure to put that as UTF-8. It has to do with the binary encodings. So don't worry about that for now. Just put encoding UTF-8. Okay. So the important part is that you can read and write to a file. You know what those new lines are. Why we have these positional named arguments, right? How to use them. So when you see code that have these things, you know exactly what's actually happening rather than just using it as is without knowing what it is, like how we did before when we printed it and specify end equal nothing. We didn't know what it was. All we knew was that it was just making sure that it doesn't go to the new line, right? So I hope it made sense. Did it? No? Right now you're like, eh. Did it make sense? Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I don't get the mode thing. Like, why is it there? Why do you define it like that?
Yeah, it's something there. It's like if you want to read the file, you have to put you have to specify that you're reading it, and if you're writing it, you have to specify it's writing, because otherwise the operations that you do, read and write, it won't work if you try. Let's say, for example, if you try to write the file, if you're in write mode and if you try to read it, it won't work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why. Like you can be in the wrong mode to do the opposite operations. Like you can be in write mode and reading, and you can be in read mode and write to it. That's like you don't know what you're doing, right? why would you open it? You know what I mean? So that's why it's there. Any other questions? No questions? Crystal clear? All right. So next assignment, I already did it. So I haven't wrote it down exactly. So it's about crosswords, okay, or word search. So word search, you know that it has you have done it, right? Like in your kindergarten classes, right? Or grade 1, grade 2, they give you a sheet with all the letters, and it's a square, right? Usually it's a square, and it has a bunch of letters in it, and they give you a list of words, and you have to find out where that word occurs in that square, right? Or so that square, you can think of it like a matrix, right? There's rows and columns, and you need to figure out where in each individual words are occurring. And we know that individual words, you can think of it as a list of characters, right? And we know how to do that. We can convert a word to a list of characters, right? Actually, let me just show you that, actually. So if I have a word, let's say baseball, okay. If I want to convert it to a list, I know we used it something like this, right? Before we did something like this. Let's say we create an empty list, and they say for character in S, and then we append it to appended that character to the list, right? And then we return the word, right? That's how we converted it, right? So if I say convert word, and if I print this, it'll print it as a list of characters, right? That's how we did it, right? So there's already an easier way to do this. So instead of doing this, I didn't tell you guys explicitly how to do that because I wanted you guys to understand that the string was in fact a list of characters. But if you just want to convert the word to a list, you can just call the list function on it. It'll automatically do the same thing. Okay, you might have already used it. You might have seen something like this, but this is another way to convert. Okay, in fact, list takes anything that is iterable and automatically create a list out of it. Okay, but this is something for you to know about. You don't want once you know the basics, you don't want to keep doing those again and again, right? It takes up time. So this is one way to convert a string to characters, a list of characters. Okay, so for the word search, you have to convert the words to a list of characters, and you need to search those list of characters in the matrix. The matrix is a list of lists, right? And we're going to have a list of characters, and you need to search whether that word, right, which is a list of characters, are occurring in there. So you would need to go through. So let's just say, so you would have a matrix, right? Let's just say one word, cat, and let's say dog is over here, or no, dog. Okay, and let's say if I have a goat. Okay, and the rest of them are filled with some meaningless characters. Okay, so if I ask you to find those things, cat, and what is it? What's the next one I put? I don't remember.
Dog and goat.
Dog and goat. Okay. So what I'm asking in the next assignment is that you would have all these words in a file. You would need to read all the words one by one, right? And then you need to the matrix would also be given as a file. Okay, it's a line of characters, and you would need to construct this in memory as a list of lists. And for each word, you need to convert that to a list of characters and search in the list where does the word cat occurs. So you will go position, like element by element, or position like index, right? Index in that list, and see whether that word occurs. So if I say G, I can already right away I can see okay, C doesn't start with G, so I skip that and come to the next element, and I see C, and I see, okay, I have 3 characters in my cat, and I see, okay, do I have enough space to search from here? Because remember, when we do an index into something like a list, and it doesn't, we're using a wrong index, it'll give us error, right? You cannot index into it. So you have to make sure that the length of the word, you have enough space in your matrix from your position to search, and you have to match whether C matches with C and A matches with A and T matches with T. So you would have to do left, yeah, hold on, Anjana.
Where's goat?
Left to right, right? And you also need to search diagonally, right? You might also need to search backwards, right? And down, up, diagonally this way, up like that, and up this way.
I see a dog.
Right? So all those things that you need to do. That's how you're going to find those words. Okay? So it's about iterating matrices and iterating. Okay? And I just put in the twist of reading stuff from the file because it'll be so tedious to give you give input, all of these input in command like console, right? It'll take forever and you can easily make mistakes when you're giving. So that's why I introduced the reading and writing to the file. Okay, so in this assignment you'll only be reading, but this is what you have to do. Okay, seems a little challenging, but it's not. It's just you just have to go through character by character, word by word, and make sure that you just have to find it. If those characters match up with your list of words, then you know it's there. Okay, and you have to search in multiple directions, not just left to right, but you have to go right to left and top down or bottom up or diagonally in all four diagonals, right? Like this way,
You can
right?
only go 8 ways.
4 ways diagonally. Let's say I'm at this character. I need to go this way, this way, this way, and this way. 4 ways to make sure that the word is there or not. I can just assume that this word that I'm looking at is the starting position, right? I just look for it. So I have to do all of that. So I have to go right, top, down, left. So yeah, basically eight ways I have to search for every position to see if that word occurs. Okay. Any questions? You guys have any doubts on how you can do this? Challenging? It's not challenging. It's actually easy. Okay, but it's going to give you more practice into the for loops and making sure that you have you're going in the like basically how do you obtain a diagonal. Remember the previous one we only looked at like the rows or like horizontal and vertical, right? Here you have to look at the diagonal. Remember the previous assignment I wrote a method to get the column, right, as a list. Here you might have to write a method to get the not just the columns but also the diagonals as a list. So once you have 2 lists, right, then you can element by element you can do a comparison to see if those 2 match up. You know what I mean? Just like we did the multiplication when we did element wise element and we multiplied and summed it up. So you can do this kind of thing to compare whether these 2 things are equal. Okay, so you have to get all these directional words and then compare if that matches that word that you have, and you have to do that for all of them. Okay, it's not hard. Just have to think as a human, what are you doing? You're just scanning it to see if there's a word in that direction, this direction, that direction, right? That is exactly what you're going to program in your program. So you have to think like yourself what you're actually doing, right, to the very basics and write it as a algorithm. Okay, make sense? All right, so I'll post that assignment tonight or tomorrow. Okay.
Wait, I have a question.
Yeah.
Will the file with the matrix all be in one line, or will it go line by line?
Line by line, like this.
Okay.
This line, this like row by row, it'll be in a different line.
Okay.
All right. All right. Arjuna is just pushing me so he can start playing games.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Bye. Talk to you next week. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Mm.
Bye.